Isn't it wonderful that there are certain things that we can implement for our orchids at the same time of year, whether you grow in the Northern or Southern Hemisphere? Where I am at, we are 8 weeks away from temperatures matching spring conditions, while on the other side of the world, you are 8 weeks away from temperatures matching fall. So, while growing orchids in different hemispheres, there's always a disconnect when making videos, because some of us are freezing cold and some of us are sweltering hot. And in either instances, our orchids demand different things. But here we are during a time of year when orchid care pretty much coincides, no matter which season you're heading into, be it spring or fall. So I would like to take this opportunity to suggest some care tips and some steps that I am now starting to do with my orchids, not just the orchids anyway. And well, just because I'm heading into spring, these exact care conditions would apply to your orchids if you are heading into fall. This is a very rare opportunity when we are in sync when it comes to being able to do the same things for our orchids. So let me make some suggestions for this time of year. But wait. Let's not get ahead of ourselves. I'm talking about 8 weeks ahead of time, and that is a long time. So why bother now, and why not wait until temperatures are actually where they are supposed to be at? Well, that is because our orchids have a very slow metabolism, and what we do now in form of some of my suggestions will take effect in approximately 8 weeks. Sometimes we can guesstimate 6 weeks, but during this time of year in both hemispheres, the weather can be bipolar, so I like to add another 2 weeks just to compensate for any temperature fluctuations while the seasons make up their minds which one is going to come out on top. The important thing and takeaway from this video is our orchids have a very slow metabolism, and what we want to try and do is not fall behind or play catch up or whatever, because suddenly things happen and suddenly we may find ourselves actually playing catch up to our orchids' needs, and that is why I'm going to share some tips with you, and hopefully these are helpful. If not, just simple reminders. Anywho, it's time to prep our orchids when it comes to preparing them for the growing season. Don't forget, no matter which hemisphere, when it comes to winter resting orchids as we head into spring, they're going to be waking up. While painfully slow, let's get them ready. Do not withhold water anymore if you have been withholding water up until now. Please pretend that you are the dew and give your winter resting orchids some water so that during the latter phase of the winter, your structures don't shrivel, thus weakening your orchid and making the wake-up process stressful. And shriveling happens very quickly, but getting those structures to recover and plump up again can be a very slow process. And while the orchid wants to wake up, there's a lot going on. A lot of energy is needed right out of the gate in order to make the wake up a smooth transition. Your winter resting orchid is going to need all the help it can get. This is not the time for fertilizer, however, but water. Definitely just enough to simulate the dew. So winter resting orchids, what does that have to do with matching orchid care when the southern hemisphere is still in full summer mode? Well, there are orchids that rest during the summer months. They are not in active growth because the conditions are too harsh, or it is just in their DNA that they kick into action when the temperatures are not as demanding anymore. So for those orchids, keep them flushed with plenty of moisture around the roots, and if you want to start adding some seaweed to that water, a very weak concentration, then 50 parts per million of seaweed will start the hormone engine going, adding to the hormone activity within the orchid, which will take time to get a move on, but it is beneficial to support the hormone activity with a little seaweed in the water. A very weak application once a month is sufficient, leading up to when the temperatures change. This way, by the time the summer resting orchid comes into active growth, it has backup to work with and to boost the growth activity when you see it happening. It is a little bit premature at this point in time to apply seaweed to our winter resting orchids. Wait until the temperatures are a little bit more favorable, but consider the coming weeks in both hemispheres. You can add a little seaweed into the water to facilitate hormone supplementation for when the time comes. And orchids coming into active growth segs beautifully into checking your orchid supplies. Some orchids will need repotting. Do you have enough pots, media, fertilizer? I don't know about you, but I have noticed that shipping can take much longer than we were accustomed to in the past, and chances are that supplies can run out very quickly this time of year because the suppliers themselves may not get the quantity of stock that they have even ordered. I know, there's more to shopping than just supplies, but I'll get to that. Just give me a moment. More importantly, at this time of year, watch the angle of the sun. Heading into spring, the sun is rising higher in the sky, meaning that some indoor orchids that used to get some sunshine are now going to be in bright shade, and vice versa. If you're heading into fall, watch that your indoor orchids do not get sunburned, because now the angle of the sun is encroaching on their leaves. If they're not cattleyas, but some that previously enjoyed the bright shade, the coming weeks could be a little bit of an uh-oh moment. So careful with which orchids you have positioned where, and watch the angle of the sun. Super important is, if you haven't already or you're thinking about it and are procrastinating, stop procrastinating, because you need to start a comprehensive pest prevention regime. Whatever products you use, either you just wipe your orchids down or you use some form of insecticide, etc. Start now, because applications for prevention usually are not applied every 10 days, as would be the case if there is a pest present, making it necessary to do applications as a form of treatment. Instead, preventative treatments can be done once a month or as per manufacturer's instructions, but still, just because seasons are changing, this is the time to support your orchids for any possible blighters that may try to find winter refuge indoors on your shelves or outdoors when your orchids go outside again, should that be something that you do. And even if your orchids do not venture outside ever, you will be opening windows soon, and those little blighters will find their way in on a breeze. Orchid protection is something we should be doing all year round, but this time of year, regardless of where you're at, it should be focused on, and the sooner we prep our orchids, the better. I know that you've been fertilizing your orchids all year round, depending on their growth habit, but in this time of year, start focusing on calcium nitrate and or a CalMag combination. No matter if you grow indoors or outdoors, the seasonal changes require that we strengthen our orchids for what is ahead. The dew point changes to cooler temperatures. We may not be able to use as many fans, or we may need more fans to avoid stagnation of air. So either way, if you can, give your orchids a few more doses of either of the two supplements, and if you can, then both. New cells, new growths will need that support no matter what season you are heading into. And also look around and monitor your humidity levels. As the temperatures rise, your humidity may drop, and vice versa. As the temperatures drop, your humidity may increase. So keep an eye on your levels, and it is possible that if you are using humidity trays, now is the time to either dust them off, clean them up, and get them ready for action. Alternatively, don't fill your humidity trays as much anymore as your temperatures drop bit by bit. If you are using a humidifier, double check the settings and monitor that nothing swings to an extreme while the weather is doing the battle of the seasons. Things can turn on a dime this time of year, which could pose a threat for your orchids. We don't want any drowned out or rotting structures. The calcium supplementation, as previously mentioned, can only do so much, so keep that humidity in check. And you can do that by monitoring your airflow. That goes hand in hand with humidity. Too much airflow will decrease the ambient temperature around your orchids as well, and too little will increase the humidity. So what once was a great balance for winter and summer, with the changing of the seasons, it's going to fluctuate like a yo-yo. Now, before I suggest the best of all this time of year, consider what you can do now to prepare your spaces for the change of the season. If you are in a position in which you shuffle your orchids from indoors to outdoors, vice versa, or from warmer areas of your grow space to cooler areas, take a moment to assess the spaces and if they need a deep clean in preparation for your orchids to be there for the coming months. Then it's a great idea to plan ahead for that in a couple of weeks. It is so much easier to work around a space when there are not orchids to worry about coming into contact with elbows. Yes, note to self. And finally, the best part of the hobby, other than getting our orchids to bloom, is the shopping. Specifically online shopping. Well, not really, but either way, shopping. The coming months are going to be so much more favorable, less stressful as we head into warmer or cooler temperatures respectively. So start looking around if you're on the market for orchids, but instead of filling the cart with beautiful orchids blindly just because of the blooms, I wouldn't fault you for that, but Now is the time to research, research, research. Get to know your new orchids in theory first, so that you can either prepare the conditions they need if you see some gaps in your environment that a new orchid would need, or if you cannot do that, then you will be better equipped to make the decision that XYZ orchid may not do well in your conditions, and then you can choose others that can match what you already have going and growing well. So how many tips was that? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 8. I think that is enough. But if you have any suggestions to add to this list of orchid prep, then please share them in the comments. Thank you. Also, please give this video a thumbs up. If you were to share it, that would be greatly appreciated, as would you subscribing to the channel. I also thank you for that support. And just to wrap things up, it is very rare that Northern and Southern Hemisphere orchid care aligns. At least we are in sync for the coming weeks. Remember, staying on top of this back and forth, up and down, swings and roundabouts of the conditions as the seasons start to change is a daily task. I have had several instances where my complacency got my orchids into trouble, some of which I could not save. And for that reason, this video. I hope that I was able to create awareness so that you and your orchids are well prepped, including any possible newcomers, ready for active growth, resting or dormancy, which don't forget, again, some orchids do rest during the summer. I find that this is a cycle in an orchid's existence that we do not take into account often enough because, well, it's warm and we grow orchids. And we think they're all in active growth, but no. If you have any questions about seasonal orchid care simplified, I would like to draw your attention to the linked video in the description. Now, that is a video that I feel is invaluable for anyone that is not sure what to do when. And while this video you're watching now is specific to the season changes coming up because the care coincides, the linked video can be applied on an orchid to orchid basis. If I may say so myself, it really makes the understanding of what to do when with orchids super easy to not just understand but also to implement. I hope this video was of some use, giving you a reminder on what to do in preparation of the season ahead, no matter where you grow your orchids, unless you happen to be in and around the equator orchid paradise. Jelly coming from me. Either way, thank you so much for the support, and thank you so much for watching to the end, giving me the opportunity to wish you a wonderful day, on the condition though, please, that you stay safe. Take care. Bye.